param. Ata, therefore. Param, transcendental. Shikshmatamam, finer than the finest. Avyaktam, unmanifested. Nivisheshanam, without material features. Anadi, without beginning. Madhya, without an intermediate stage. Nidhanam, without end. Nityam, eternal. Vak, words. Manasa, of the mind. Param, transcendental. Translation. Therefore, beyond this gross manifestation is a transcendental manifestation, finer than the finest form. It has no beginning, no intermediate stage, and no end. Therefore, it is beyond the limits of expression or mental speculation and is distinct from the material conceptions. Please repeat. Therefore, beyond this gross manifestation is a transcendental manifestation, finer than the finest form. It has no beginning, no intermediate stage, and no end. Therefore, it is beyond the limits of expression or mental speculation, and is distinct from the material conception. The purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The gross external body of the Supreme is manifested at certain intervals, and thus the external feature or form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not the eternal form of the Lord, which has no beginning, no intermediate stage, and no end. Anything which has a beginning, interim, and end is called material. The material world is begun from the Lord, and thus the form of the Lord before the beginning of the material world is certainly transcendental to the finest, or the finer material conception. The ether in the material world is considered to be the finest, finer than the ether is mind, intelligence, and false ego, but all of the 8 outward coverings are explained as outer coverings of the Absolute Truth. The Absolute Truth is therefore beyond the expression and speculation of all material conception. He is certainly transcendental to all material conception. This is called Nivisheshanam. One should not, however, misunderstand Nivisheshanam as being without any transcendental qualifications. Visheshanam means qualities. Therefore, near added to it means he has no material qualifications or variegatedness. This nullifying expression is described in 4 transcendental qualifications, namely unmanifested, transcendental, eternal, and beyond the conception of mind or word. Beyond the limit of words means negation of the material conception. Unless one is transcendentally situated, it is not possible to know the transcendental form of the Lord. Translation again. Therefore, beyond this gross manifestation is a transcendental manifestation, finer than the finest form. It has no beginning, no intermediate stage, and no end. Therefore, it is beyond the limits of expression or mental speculation, and is distinct from the material conception. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Excuse me. So in the past verses in the chapter, it's described the Virat form of the Lord, or the universal form, and the development of the different organs of the bodily organs of the Lord and the the bodily functions and the sense organs. It describes how the Lord develops his legs, his desire for food and drink, the activities of the Lord, and his desire to move, his desire to evacuate, all these different things. So there's more described about the universal form in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is entitled The Universal Form. And in this chapter, Arjuna, he accepts Krishna as the Lord of everything. And we also have to remember that Arjuna is put into illusion by the will of the Lord so that the Bhagavad Gita can be spoken. Just like Maharaj Parikshit was put into illusion, as it's described by Prabhupada as the will of providence, because Parikshit Maharaj wouldn't, he was a Mahabhagavat devotee of the Lord, he wouldn't be so illusioned that he would be out hunting and come to the hermitage of a sage and put a snake around his neck because he wasn't welcomed. This is just not possible for him to do it if he was in his proper state of mind, but because the Lord wanted the Bhagavatam to be spoken, and in this case the Bhagavad Gita to be spoken, Arjuna is put into illusion. So Arjuna, he accepts Krishna as the Supreme Lord, but then because he wants that in the future people would accept Krishna as the Supreme, and they may not do just by hearing Krishna, but by seeing the universal form of the Lord, it would be more convincing for them. So in this way, Arjuna, he asked Krishna, please you show me your universal form. So that he's doing this for the benefit of everyone else. So then Krishna, he shows his universal form to Arjuna, and when Arjuna sees this universal form, he's really frightened. And this material form, this universal form of the Lord is transcendental because it's a form of the Lord, but because it's temporary in the way that it manifests at the time of creation, and then it unmanifests at the time of dissolution, and then manifests and unmanifests again. So that's why it's known as material. So Krishna tells Arjuna, you can't see me with your present eyes, so I'll give you divine eyes to see me, to see the Virat form of the Lord. So in the 12th chapter, it's described that if hundreds and thousands of suns were to rise at once in the sky, their radiance might resemble the effulgence of that Supreme Person in the universal form. But when Arjuna saw this form, he was very frightened, because in the form it showed that all the soldiers that were entering the mouth of the universal form and they were being destroyed. And Arjuna says to Krishna, please Krishna, I want to see your beautiful two-handed form again, which is very dear to me. So then Krishna, he manifested his two-armed form again. So then, as it says in the purport, everything material has a beginning, middle, and end. So we know from the creation of the universe, it starts in the beginning with Brahma manifesting from the body of Garbhodaksha Vishnu from the lotus stem, and then the creation starts. And when the creation starts, there's a day of Brahma in which the four yugas, they go on. That we have the Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali Yuga, and Lord Brahma's day lasts for 1,000 times the four yugas. So the yugas are continuously going on, and in this time, the living entity, with his desire to enjoy this material world, he's just taking different species and different forms of life, and he's trying to enjoy the material world. And until he learns his lessons that this is not the place to be. So then at the end of the day of Lord Brahma, there's something called the Partial Devastation. And the Partial Devastation is when Lord Sankarshan at the bottom of the causal ocean, he's very angry with the conditioned souls due to their disobedience of the Lord, and there's a fire that emanates from his mouth, and it's burning the universes. And there's also a big flood as well. So this flood, for the partial devastation, it covers the lower planets, the middle planets where we are, and then also the Swargaloka, the heavenly planets. But there's 4 planetary systems it doesn't cover, and that's Mahaloka, Janaloka, and Tapaloka and Brahmaloka. And then once the living entities the bodies have been destroyed, then the spirit souls, they go and reside in the body of the universal form until the time of the next creation, which is during the next day of Brahma. So the material world has its beginning, middle, and end, and there's a very nice verse in the Bhagavad Gita in the 5th chapter, where the Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yona evate ajyanta vanta kunteya natesha ramate buddhaha. The intelligent person does not take part in the sources of miseries which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, so the wise person does not partake in them. So here in this verse, Krishna is described. He's finer than the finest, and he has no beginning, intermediate stage, and no end, and is beyond the expression of mental speculation, and is distinct from the material conception. So the Lord has 3 aspects. There's the Brahman feature of the Lord, there's the Paramatma feature, and there's the Bhagavan feature. And to describe this, Srila Prabhupada, he gives the example of the sun globe, and the sun god. So the Jnanis, who are speculators, they are interested in the Brahman feature of the Lord, and they accept that as everything. Then you have the yogis who meditate on the super soul, and they are more Paramatma realized. And then you have the most advanced, which are the bhaktas, the devotees of the Lord. They're just interested in the personal form of the Lord, the Bhagavan feature, the form of all opulence, and the form of the Lord where we can actually have a reciprocal relationship with the Lord. Krishna, he's full of all wonderful qualities. He possesses all wonderful qualities in full, whereas the living entities, we only have the qualities in very minute forms. He's the supreme enjoyer, and we are the enjoyed. He's eternal, transcendental, and full of bliss. So in the first verse of the Brahma Samhita, it's described by Lord Brahma. It's actually very, very beautiful, the Brahma Samhita. The first word, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. So Krishna is Ishvara Parama Krishna. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Satchitananda Vigraha. His body is full of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. And Adir Govinda. He is the origin of everything. And Sarvakarana Karanam, he is the cause of all causes. Then I'm just going to read the next 3 verses in which Lord Brahma, he describes Krishna. They're very beautiful. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is tending the cows, yielding all desires in abodes filled with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock feather, and with a figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers, beautified with the moon locket, whose 2 hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornament, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shamasunda is eternally manifest. So this is Krishna, like it's saying here that Krishna is Visheshan. He is full of all wonderful qualities, and one of Krishna's most beautiful qualities is his kindness. Krishna Krishna's always wanting us to come back to him, so he's very merciful, and he's very merciful that he manifests himself in the deity form of the Lord, so that we can actually serve him, we can cook for him, we can dress him, we can sing for him, we can pray for him, because God is a person, and he's a supreme person. And actually here at New Govardhan, we're very, very fortunate because we have the most beautiful Radha Govardhandari, and they must be one of the most reciprocal deities ever. I'm sure we've all had experiences with Radha Govardhandari that we pray to them, and sometimes immediately we get our results, but they don't fulfill our material desires unless we really want to get into Maya. But if we want to serve the Lord, then he'll fulfill our spiritual desires to serve him. So to develop this relationship with the Lord, we actually have to learn to cry for the Lord. We have to develop these feelings for the Lord, because Prabhupada describes it as a child's cry for its mother, because a child is completely dependent on the mother, and that's all it knows. So I just want to read this one blog. There's one devotee called Sutapa Prabhu. He's from Bhaktivedanta Man, a very nice devotee. He's a brahmachari, and he's on his way to becoming a sannyasi. So he wrote in his latest blog, it's called Crying School. It's really nice, so it's something I'd like to share with you all. As we enter the post-COVID era, I'm back on the road, well, more specifically in the air, flying from one terminal to another, making one small attempt to share spiritual inspiration in the urban jungle. On a recent flight to Cairo, I managed to secure the sought-after emergency seat. When you're over 6 foot tall, that's a big deal. Unfortunately, every perk comes at a price. Emergency seats tend to be where newborn babies also hang out, and often they're loud, crying, distressed babies. Today was one of those days. All the legroom in the world, but a screaming backtrack to accompany it. This flight was going to require some mind control. I remember Bhaktivedanta Swami, who taught us to desperately call out while chanting God's name, like a baby cries for the mother. That was a flash of inspiration. I reached for my prayer beads, closed my eyes, and synchronized every bursting screech of the baby with a recitation of the mantra. I tried to internalize the cry and embody desperation in my meditation, mysteriously therapeutic. I found my meditation growing in depth. Interestingly, the Bhagavad Gita first chapter is entitled Vishad Yoga, the yoga of desperation. Real spiritual connection is triggered when a deep urgency burns within, driving one to venture beyond a space that is no longer habitable and satisfying. Crying is a part of everyone's life, at all stages and in all settings. There is the cry of the samsarika, one entangled in material life, a cry of frustration, born from the frantic and futile search for substance in the shadow. A sage poetically described how the combined tears shed by the samsarika over lifetimes would amount to an entire ocean. Then there's the cry of the sadhaka, a spiritual aspirant seeking connection, a cry of desperation to become serious, sincere, and spontaneously involved with the Supreme Person. Finally, there is the cry of the Siddha, the perfect soul, a cry of intoxication arising from the inexplicable joy of divine love in multifarious flavors and tastes. There's no question of avoiding tears, but just of a question of what one will cry for. A great saint describes temples as crying schools, and that was actually Govinda Maharaj. Unique places where one could learn how to channel the emotions of the heart to trigger divine communion. Indeed, Srila Prabhupada mentions this in the last word of love, to unleash the crying of the soul for God. On that journey to Cairo, I prayed that the samsarika cry of the baby would become the sadhaka cry of myself, so that one day it would become the Siddha cry in the transcendental realm, a good lesson in the air. So I think that was really, really beautiful. And the living entity is always going through birth after birth, looking for this happiness, but because we're looking in the wrong places, in the temporary places, then we have to experience a lot of suffering. We may experience temporary happiness, but it's very, very temporary. And in this regard, I'd like to talk about the story of Bilvamangal Thakur. Bilvamangal Thakur's story is very interesting because especially his beginning of his life was quite a bit of a roller coaster ride. So Bilvamangal Thakur, he was born as Silana Mishra, and he was born in the 8th century, and he was born to a South Indian Brahmin, but his family was very rich, so he was also a householder, but he had one fault, in which he was very attached to a prostitute whose name was Chintamani. So he squandered a lot of his father's wealth on this prostitute. And one day his father died. So Silhana Mishra, he was meant to be performing the funeral rites of his father. But at the same time, all he was thinking of was, I want to get to Chintamani because that's whom I love, So he quickly performed the funeral rites, and then he went to see Chintamani. So on that day, it was actually a very stormy day, and it was very windy, and it was actually a very dangerous day, but he was very determined. So he went to the river because Chintamani lived across the river. And there was a boatman, and he said to the boatman, "Can you take me across the river?" And the boatman said, "No, sorry, no way. It's very, very dangerous. I'm not doing that. I'm going home now." So Silana Mishra, he was very determined that he was going to see Chintamani. So he swam across the river, and as he was swimming, he caught of what he thought was a log to cross the river. And he crossed the river, and then he realized it was actually a dead body. So he finally got to Chintamani's house, but the gates were locked. So what he thought was a rope hanging from the wall, he climbed up the rope when he got to the other side. But it wasn't a rope, it was actually a dangerous snake. So, but then he got to the front, and he was banging on the door for Chintamani to let him in. So Chintamani opened the door, and she was really shocked. And so she let him in, and she said, "Why have you come here? Outside it's so dangerous, and the weather's so bad." And he said, "Chintamani, I came to see you." And she said to him, "You came to see me?" And he said, "Yes, I love you, Chintamani." And Chintamani said, "What? You love this temporary material body. This isn't love. This is just lust. If you had this kind of love for Krishna, you would be a pure devotee." So she all night long he stayed there, and she just sang songs of Krishna, and his heart began to change. So then the next day he left. And Chintamani, at that point, she was very fed up with her profession. She gave up her profession, and she just dedicated herself to the Lord, and she gave away all her possessions. So Silana Mishra, he decided he'd go to Vrindavan, but before he went, he took initiation from a great soul called Somagiri. So then on the way to Vrindavan, he got distracted again. The serpent of lust, it reared its head, and he saw this married female lady, and he became very attracted to her. And his mind became very bewildered. So he started to follow her, and she went home. And the husband was there, and he saw him, saw Silana Mishra at the door, and said, "Oh, please come in. How can I serve you? You're a guest, so whatever you want, I will do for you." So Silana Mishra said, "I want to be alone with your wife." So the husband was very shocked, but because he was his guest, he said, "Okay, I said I will give you what you want, so I will let you do that. So Salana Mishra, he's alone with the wife, but then he's beginning to come to his senses again. He's remembering what Chintamani told him. So he says to the wife, please, I'm asking you one request. You please fulfill this request for me. Please, you give me the hairpins from your hair. So the wife, she took the hairpins out and she gave them to Salana Mishra. And Salana Mishra was like, these eyes are what are causing me suffering. These eyes are what are keeping me away from Krishna. So with those hairpins, he poked out his eyes. And everyone's very shocked. But then he was like, okay, well, at least this is going to help me. I mean, it's not recommended, but this is what he did. And so then he went with great difficulty on his way to Vrindavan. And so he was always singing and thinking about Krishna. And when he got to Vrindavan, Krishna actually appeared to him, but he didn't know it was Krishna. He said, oh, my name is Nandhalal. I'm a cowherd boy in this area, and I've brought you some milk. So he brought some milk for Bilvamangal Thakur. And so Bilvamangal Thakur, he stayed in the area of Vrindavan for, it's actually said for 700 years. And in this time, he went from being the person who was interested in a prostitute to becoming very much absorbed in the service of the Lord. And he actually became such a great devotee that he actually could enter into the pastimes of the Lord. And one of his most famous writings is called the Krishna Karanamruta. It's a very beautiful book in which he writes about the glories of the Lord and of Srimati Radhika. And this book, when actually he used to recite the Krishna Karanamruta, Krishna used to personally come and sit down and listen to him. He was so attracted to it. And so also the residents of the area, because Salana Mishra, because he was so absorbed in the devotional service of the Lord, he got such pleasure from the Lord. They gave him the name Lila Sukha. And so Lila Sukha means one who's absorbed very much in the pastimes of the Lord. And Sukha actually means parrot, as we know from the name Sukadev Goswami, that when a parrot tastes fruit, it actually becomes sweeter. So when Sukadev Goswami recited the Bhagavatam, it actually became sweeter and more relishable for the liberated souls. And in the same way, Lila Sukha, when he recited the pastimes of the Lord, it became very, very sweet. And actually, Lord Chaitanya, he very much loved this book of Bilvamangal Thakur. That was his name later on. And when he went to South India, he heard a group of pure Brahmanas. They were reciting and discussing Krishna Karanamruta. And he very much liked it that he got them to make a copy for him, and he took it with him. And it said that Lord Chaitanya, there was two books he really loved, and that was the Brahma Samhita and Krishna Karanamruta. So there was one song that Bilvamangal Thakur wrote that I also wanted to share. It's called Chorastikam. I'm sure some devotees know this song. So Chor means thief, and Astika means 8 verses, and it's very beautiful. So it goes: the most famous in Vraj as a butter thief, he who steals the clothes of the gopis, steals the sins which have accrued over many lifetimes. I offer my pranam to that foremost of thieves. The one who steals Srimati Radhika's heart, who steals the dark luster of a fresh rain cloud, steals the sins of those who take shelter of his feet. I offer my pranam to that foremost of thieves. He turns his surrendered devotees into paupers and wandering homeless beggars. Aho, such a fearsome thief has never been seen or heard of in all the 3 worlds. Mere utterance of his name purges one of a mountain of sins. Such an astonishingly wonderful thief I have never seen or heard of anywhere. Having stolen my wealth, my honor, my senses, stolen my life and my everything, where can you run to, O thief? I have caught you with the rope of my devotion. You cut the terrible noose of Yamaraj. You sever the dreadful noose of material existence. You slash everyone's material bondage, but you are unable to cut the knot fastened by your own loving devotees. I've imprisoned you in the miserable prison house of my heart, which is very fearsome due to the terrible darkness of my ignorance. Therefore, a very long time you will remain, receiving appropriate punishment for your crimes of thievery. The noose of my devotion remains forever tight. You will continue to reside within the prison house of my heart. Because for many millions of eons, O Krishna, thief of my everything, I will not release you. So we're very fortunate that we have Srila Prabhupada who came, has given this as the absolute highest truth, and he's given as a process of going back to Godhead by realizing Krishna, he's not to worship Krishna as Brahman, Paramatma, but to worship him as the Supreme Bhagavan. So now we have come to devotional service. We shouldn't waste this. We shouldn't waste this lifetime. We've wasted many other lifetimes, but this lifetime, we should get the realization that this is it. I want to go back to Godhead in this lifetime. We've just been reading about the creation, the annihilation, the maintenance of the universe, and this is something that we've experienced. We've experienced this so many unlimited lives. The living entity is Nityabada. He's eternally conditioned. He's been eternally conditioned means he's been here for a very, very long time. But still, that such a strong desire to enjoy. It's very prominent. But as Queen Kunti says, that when we come to the point of we have to be akinchana gochara, we have to become materially exhausted. We have to come to this point where we realize, okay, we've been through all these lifetimes, and even now we've experienced in this lifetime, we've tried to enjoy, but what results did we get? And all that happens is we grow old and then we go on to our next body. So now we have this chance to go back to Godhead. We have to dig our heels in, and we have to dig deeper into our spiritual life and not be satisfied where we are. We always have to be progressing more and more. And as Prabhupada says, and as Siddha Prabhu was saying, we have to learn to cry. We have to learn to cry like the baby for its mother, because it's such a cry of desperation. And it's amazing, like Prabhupada said, the closest thing to pure love of Godhead in this life is the love between a mother and a child. If you're a parent, you know what this means, like your love for your child. It's so strong, it's like an unbreakable love. And I'm sure we've all experienced that. And as a parent, you know how strong that love is.